Sujata Tibrewala. I don't know if you guys have read my bio, a brief one, but I'll introduce myself. I work for a company called Bytedance. Please raise your hands right if you have heard of it. Oh, wow, quite a few. For those who have not heard of it, it is parent company of TikTok. And I work in their open source program office. No surprises. I'm talking about open source. I joined them only a few months ago, but I used to be at Intel before that. How many of you know that Intel is one of the biggest open source contributors? 2 people. Right. Intel is one of the biggest contributors. Yes, Red Hat has an entire model on top of open source, a business model. So I joined Intel's open source office in 2016. And before that, I used to be a developer at a vertically integrated closed source protocol stack. I used to be a networking software developer that can be as closed as things can get. So I worked for Cisco, Ericsson, Avaya, blah, blah, blah. So I was just talking to not one of my colleagues, Joshua, my colleague at Bytedance. He had a talk at 12:45. I don't know how many of you caught that. So my foray into open source was pretty much by accident. I was at Cisco. I was at Cisco India for some time, and then I had to leave my job to be with my husband when we came to United States. And then after 3 years of moving from one city to the other, I decided it was enough. I looked for a job myself. My daughter was getting into high school, so I was like, me and my daughter will be in one place. And we were in Chicago at that time. I was a network software developer. No jobs in Chicago at that time in network software development. I removed the location constraint, and lo and behold, I ended up in the Valley. Okay, and I ended up in Cisco. No surprises. And so initially, they had me do some kind of TCAM optimizations. How many of you have heard of TCAM? It's a type of memory, right? So if you're in networking software, you're working very close to hardware. And the TCAM was not optimized. I was doing that. But suddenly, 2 months into my job, they said, scrap everything you did, and we are going into SDN. They gave me a specification, and I have to code that. I did that. After I finished coding, they said, bye-bye. We don't need you anymore. I was a consultant at that time. And that's when so I was in the market looking for a job again. And I updated my project, which happened to be SDN. How many of you have heard of SDN? Software-defined networking. We are actually in the place that started that movement. Google started that movement. I put that on my resume, and I started getting bombarded with recruiters' requests. I'm like, oh my God, this thing is hot. I need to now actually look up what it is. Yeah, so strange. I actually coded, but I didn't know what SDN was. And that's when I realized how small my life was as a developer. I was working on a small piece of code. If you ask me about SDN, you ask me about that specification, I knew everything. But where does it fit into the big picture? What is the 10,000 view, 50,000 view? Nothing. So that's when I luckily I was in Bay Area. And what you guys are doing today, I did that. I went to meetups, relevant meetups on SDN, and started learning about that. And that actually led me to a path at Intel. And again, how I ended up at Intel was also a story, because before this, I was a software developer, like I told you. But during those times, I realized I was tired of talking to a computer 24 hours a day. And I wanted to talk to actual people. And I realized I had skills I could communicate technology to people, unlike many engineers. I wanted to make use of that. So I was looking for a job that would use my technical and personal skills both. So I was applying to many jobs. And what do you think are jobs that use both people and technical skills? Sales manager, okay. Product management, sorry, sales engineer, consulting. There's one developer relations, but nobody, because that guy is in developer relations. I know that. I talked to him before it. I didn't know that something like that existed, okay? So like you guys, I thought, so I come from academic background, so if you're in academic background, sales is like a dirty word. I don't know if you guys feel that. So of course I didn't apply for sales positions, but I applied for managerial positions. But I also found a community manager position at Intel, and I applied for it, and I got it. That's when I realized, oh, okay. That's when I looked at that job, I realized, oh, that's a thing. So that is how I ended up into this job. But then there were questions about how do you make the shift. So generally, nobody will hire you until you're already doing that thing. So Intel hired me because I was already doing those things before I even applied. In the sense, I was working with the community, I was chairing documentation teams within the company. I was talking at conferences for women in networking and things like that. So they knew that I could talk about technology. I could think on my feet and I can talk, and that's why they hired me. Okay, so I hope I didn't bore you for this story. So for how many people this headline is a surprise? The title of the slide. How many of you think, so what kind of contributions are needed in open source? Yes.
Technical and non-technical.
Okay.
And so for technical code part, depending on the issues, we can see which one you want to work with. And then documentation, where you can either just work on simple English skills as well, like localizing the documentation, or start with creating in your own own languages which you're comfortable with, like writing documentation or tutorials for Python, C#, Java, whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, what else? So I was talking to somebody earlier when at the booth, and they said, oh, but open source, okay, I can, sharpen my skills with open source. But what about, I actually, so this person was in managerial plus technical, so she had some aspirations there. But open source, and this is what I told this person, is open source is like a product in a company, right? So the code is just a part of it. For it to be successful, it has to have a community around it. Now we come to this gentleman's question and that gentleman's question, right? How do you pick the right open source, right? So yes, you need to see whether that open source solves your problem technically. But you also have to see, is there a thriving community behind it? Do you know what a thriving community means behind an open source project? So is just one company contributing to it? That will not be a thriving open source project, right? How many of you heard of Kubernetes? Yes, everybody, almost everybody. Why? Because it has a thriving community. There's a lot of people contributing to it. But that doesn't happen in itself. Open source needs people like me, Joshua, and this gentleman, Vikas, right? Vishal, sorry, Vishal. To help build that community, help build the connections with developers, help build the connections with ecosystem. So in other words, like he mentioned, documentation, trainings, going to conferences and talking about it, because it may be the best technology, but if you don't know about it, you're not going to look at it, because like you mentioned, it's a forest out there, right? Yeah. So this is what I did. So when I started, if you see my picture over there, I'm talking at a DPDK conference, and I'll be surprised if any of you know the name of that project. Oh, there's somebody who knows. Okay. So if you're not from networking software background, you will not know it, because networking is like plumbing. Nobody bothers about it until things work. You only think about it when things don't work, right? So DPDK is part of that. It is that plumbing. So basically, before DPDK started, everything was vertically integrated. And I wouldn't say DPDK was one of the things that made SDN possible, but definitely was a critical part of it. But then when DPDK started, it was actually a project spawned by Intel into the ecosystem. So everybody thought of DPDK as Intel DPDK. So I worked very hard to debrand Intel from DPDK, got in competitors of Intel into DPDK. A lot of our management was not happy about it, but we did it anyway because that's the right thing to do in open source. And that actually converted a lot of our customers, moved our customers from our competitors to DPDK, even though we got the competitors in. So I'll tell you a story. We were trying to get Nokia onto DPDK, onto Intel chipset, but they were an ARM shop. They were using ARM at that time. So our marketing had got them into the DPDK summit. That's the picture right there, that particular DPDK summit. And whenever there was a question in the audience, so this guy standing next to me, he's one of the principal engineers in DPDK. He actually didn't answer any questions, to his credit. There were people from Cavium and ARM and other people in the audience, and it's like, let them answer it. And actually, they answered the questions. And because of that, Nokia was convinced that DPDK is not an Intel project, and there is a thriving community. And finally, they were converted into Intel chipset and DPDK. So that is the power of open source and community, because nobody wants to be logged in. So basically, open source, if it has customers, it is a thriving project. When will it have customers? When there is a community. How will it have community? If developers adopt it, right? So I'll come back. So there are some other projects that I worked on during that time. So since, I don't know, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're almost, we don't have much time, almost halfway through. So a lot of you said that you are here for career development, right? So how many of you have seen this Venn diagram? Okay, a few of you have seen, right? So this is self-explanatory, right? How many of you are in this state? You are pretty much talented. I mean, the fact that you're in Silicon Valley, you're skilled, right? And probably you're making money, right? Rich and miserable is an overstatement. But probably, how many of you know are happy in your career? Nobody's raising their hands. A few people. Okay. Okay. So if I were to put a, what is your passion? If I were to say that what is your passion? Don't say it aloud because we are short on time, right? But if your passion involves something that does not make money, but you're following your passion, what happens? You're happy, but probably not making a lot of money, right? And but you are passionate about something, and but you don't have talent for it, so nobody will hire you. So probably you're just dreaming, right? Where do we want to actually go? We want to go at the sweet spot where you are able to marry your passion, talent, and money, right? So, so this is one of the surveys, and because we are short on time, I will not harp on it. So, I mean, whoever thought that money is not important, yes, it is, but only to a level to make you comfortable. Beyond that, it doesn't make you happy, right? Work life balance, yes, you need it to make you happy. Somebody said skill development, right? You need that constantly. Like looking back at my career, whenever I had opportunity to keep learning new things, I was always happy. And whenever I stagnated, I was out in the market looking for a job. Okay? So find a job that needs helps you learn new things, and the level of autonomy. And the last but not the least, for the same amount of money that somebody makes, people in non-profit are much happier than people who are working for corporates. Okay? So this is just a survey. Now, what if I tell you open source can give you all of that? Sorry?
If it's given to me, I would just take that.
You will take that? Yes. Okay, so let's. Um, so, open source, you can contribute. Most people know that open source is about skill or talent, right? But then, not many people know that it's also about leadership. I already touched upon that, right? So, you can just have a look at it for a few seconds, right? So, when you want to choose a project that solves a real problem, a problem that you're facing. The reason why Kubernetes is successful, yes, Google open sourced it, but it solved a problem that many others were facing. So they didn't contribute to Kubernetes just because Google outsourced it, open sourced it. They were contributing to Kubernetes because it was solving one of the problems that they were facing too, right? So when you're looking at the open source project, think from that hat. Is it solving your problem, right? And on the talent or the skill section, right? If something you're not learning in the job that you're doing currently, find an open source project that can give you that skill, okay? So that way you will learn while doing, okay? Then in the leadership front, if you are looking for more leadership roles, communication, writing, making videos, make video about the open source project that you're working on. Most open source projects, even if backed by big companies, they are underfunded. Tell me if you, agree to that. Yeah? Even like big projects like Kubernetes, companies do open source it, but they're always looking for contributions, right? So whatever are you passionate about? So for example, today, I am passionate about green technology. My company maybe doesn't put that much emphasis on that. But I found an open source project that will allow me to contribute to that. And then I will help my company adopt it also. I will work for it. And hopefully that will, lead to something else. So that is a way for me to shift from what I am doing to something that I'm passionate about. Does that make sense? Okay. Have I covered most of the talk? Okay. How would you make sure your contribution to open source gives you return on investment or what you're looking for, right? So, how many of you have graduated college? Okay, so there are still a few people in college, so probably you don't know. But in real world, there is no pathway that, okay, you follow this and you'll get a good grade and somebody will give you an award. It doesn't happen that way. Open source is pretty much like that. That's what I did with my career, you know. I mean, I got a few promotions because of open source, because I was contributing to open source. I was actually at a time doing two jobs. I was doing my job at Intel, and I was also working at open source. But what it gave me was visibility in the industry. A lot of people think, oh, networking is good, right? But networking doesn't mean having wine with somebody or taking out somebody for lunch. You'll forget them fast. You have to build long-lasting relationships with people. And how do you build long-lasting relationships with people? By helping them. So, for example, this particular anecdote, right? Nokia and the team. So the marketing, I didn't get anything out of it. That was not my job. I was not in marketing. I was not in sales. I was not in accounting. Account management. The account management team, marketing team, or the executive who was trying to get Nokia as the leader, they all got that limelight. It ended up in their keynote. But when I was out there looking for a job, that executive gave me a good LinkedIn review. And that is the type of, but then like I was just doing my job. I was not doing anything out of the way. I was just trying to do things right by the community. But then if you are being really, I'm having difficulty in article. If you're being true to yourself and true to the community. So when I started our Intel community, our managers and our marketing managers wanted to put Intel logo on everything. I said, no, this is an open source project. We are not putting Intel logo on everything. We created a DPDK template, and we used DPDK template on everything. When we had the DPDK summit, we gave the speakership to 70% non-Intel speakers. If our management said, oh, this is my pet project on top of DPDK, can you talk about it in your meetup at your conference? I'm like, okay, I'll give you a slot one time. If the developers like it and you give me another content, I'll give you another slot. If not, no, I don't care. Because for me, developers come first. Because if developers go away, I'll not have that conference, I'll not have that meetup, and this executive will be unhappy anyway. So it's better for me to make that executive unhappy at the start. So my point is, if you are true, if you are doing things just to help the community can sense it. If you are marketing, developers can sense it also. And they will, So I know, are we out of time now? Yes, okay. So I had some examples, but looks like we don't have time. So just going to call to action. So find the project that you are passionate about, that you can get skills on. Make sure that it is a thriving project. And if you are not sure how to work on it, pick a mentor, wherever you are in your career goal. So many times, if I've failed an interview, I've asked the hiring manager, can you be my mentor? That's how I've learned. That's how I've grown. So, don't be afraid. Ask people. And just start to contribute. And don't be afraid to show the work that you're doing. And last but not the least, include others. If somebody else has helped you, shout it out of the roof and tell this person has helped me. Next time, that person will be more motivated to help you. And if you have a negative feedback on somebody, go and talk to them one-on-one. So in our language, there is a saying, happiness increases when shared, and sadness reduces when shared, right? So share the happiness, share the sadness, or like, challenges, but to the limited team. Okay, so sorry, I didn't get to the innovator program, but let me share the QR code. So these are some of the open source projects since we're out of time. Yeah, you can scan this QR code, find us on the booth. My LinkedIn contact is also there. And yeah, let's talk. Thank you.